Alright, back once again, and this time I'm redoing my original practical use of power sourcing video because the old one was based off of information before the December 13th updates where they've fixed to some degree the root combiners, which makes all of this a whole lot easier to do and allows some more options to be done without a lot of extra crap on the wall here. So what I've done here is I've created a setup that I'm going to use here for those of you wanting to use some windmills and some power or just multiple power sources and create two different power branches for use in your base that have different priorities. So let me start with the power sources. For those of you relatively new to power here, these windmills have to be placed on a foundation at least 3 spaces apart. So they have to be, 2 away from the wall, 2 away from each other. That's an important thing to note. That's frustrating when you're trying to place a windmill. I've taken both these windmills, put them into a root combiner. I brought that root combiner over to the root combiner that's sitting on the wall here. I've set up 2 sets of solar arrays here. They each have a root combiner. I am combining those 2 solar arrays together and then bringing them up to the root combiner on the wall. So this whole series of root combiners here ultimately results in 3 different power sources all coming together in one spot for a grand total output of 146 units of power. One thing I'm going to show off here from the new update also is that power output is affected by health. I intentionally damaged these solar panels so you can see even though it's directly in the sun and it should be giving 20, since it's at 50% health it's only giving 10. So repair your solar panels. Alright, so now that we have this full input of power coming in and a reasonable amount of it, 142 units, the first step here is the branch that I use to take off sort of your master live power source output and separate it from your leftover power. And the leftover power is what I'm using to charge the battery and trigger whether or not the battery should turn on. So this is effectively a threshold trigger. It right now is set to output 55 units of power because I've decided just arbitrarily, and your results will vary by what you're doing, that I want 55 units of power for running lights and doors and all kinds of other crap. If it gets below that level, there will be no power coming out of the power out on this branch, which will cause this branch, where I'm taking a 1 unit tap over to this blocker, to turn off the battery. I'm taking the remainder of the excess power, the other 73 units or so, and I'm running it into the input on the battery. So while I have sufficient power, anytime I have above my threshold of this unit here, which is 55, all the excess power is being sent to the battery to charge it, and 1 unit is being sent to the blocker to make sure the battery is turned off so that it does in fact charge effectively while we're not using it. So you can have a series of batteries over here. Another rule to remember is always put a blocker as the first thing after your batteries because everything else is a power load, and power loads discharge batteries, and you can't charge batteries as fast as they discharge, so always put a blocker as your first thing after your battery and or series of batteries. So if that's where the excess power is going, where's the main power going? Well, the main power goes into an OR switch. This is my main power going into this side of the OR switch. Here's the battery output, of which there is none right now, into the other side of the OR switch. That way, if the sun goes down and the windmills stop, or they get too slow and I get below that 55 threshold here, that's going to turn off power here. That's going to turn on the blocker to allow power through, and you'll see the output from the battery coming in here. Since that output will be higher than this at that point, the battery will put out 100, and this will be, less than 55. This will then send 100 units through here to be used by the rest of my setup. Now, a new thing I've done here to demonstrate that I haven't shown in videos before is I actually have 2 sets of main power outputs using the same threshold type of concept. I put a branch off of the main power output here that has 30 units coming out, which I'm going to call my priority 1 or high priority branch. In this case, it's being used for a door trigger. You might use it for your base defense security related systems, door controls and other things that aren't or that are critical to the operation of your base. That way, if the power does start dropping, you can this branch here, this power output of this branch will lose power first. You always get priority out of the branch. The leftover goes out, the power out. So that means if your main power starts dropping too low for some reason, say you had some undersized batteries, or maybe you weren't using a battery, you were just using live power, the priority will be this 30 units going out right here. Anything left over goes up to this branch. This is my, let's call secondary or tertiary branch of power, and this I've set to 11 units, which is just enough to power all 6 of my lights over here. They generally need about 2 units of power each, roughly, so 11 is just barely enough to turn those on. And you can see I still have 7 units left over, which is great. Another thing I want to show off to you here is what happens with power usage. If you overload a circuit, you don't lose everything, you lose the furthest thing down the circuit. So if I change this power output down just a hair, I'll take it down to 10, you'll see I lose the last 2 lights in this string. They're wired in series all the way around this way. So you can see that when you cut the power down, you lose 2 lights, you don't lose everything. So that can be a strategic move of how you wire up your lights or your base defenses, putting your most important stuff closest to the power source. You can also use that as a trigger. If you were to have devices at the end of this string, you'd also be able to sense if your power is dropping because the device at the end of that string goes out. I haven't really shown much about using base defense stuff, but here, if this was your main base defense circuit, I have it going into a pad, pressure pad, so if I step on the pressure pad, it opens the door control. That's kind of a basic use of this. You can use laser triggers or even wall, like manual switches for that. You can get really creative about putting lots of guns and traps and stuff behind doors and having people open them automatically and get blown to hell. That's pretty fun. So here's an overall view of it with all of the combiners bringing the main power in, and then of course the main power gets branched so that we have our production power going to our OR switch and all the leftover going to power up the battery, charge up the battery, and then off of that OR switch we have our main power, which I'm showing here how you can split that twice and use the configurable output. And remember, these are configurable. If you hold down E, that tells you how much you want to come out the branch side. You can use configurable outputs to build priorities. Hello. And that's about it for today.